Well, welcome to Phuket and Thailand, and welcome to 2016 ALSMA Annual Conference. Let me first thank you for being here and for understanding the special constraints that we have faced with following the demise of the King of Thailand. On behalf of ALSMA and all its members, I would like to again extend our deepest condolences to our Thai member and to all Thai people. Our theme this year is making money from digital, practical advice for publishers. This afternoon we'll be focusing on new digital products and services, and tomorrow our focus will move to the future of digital sales and marketing. If you manage to make it all the way to Wednesday, which I hope you do, we'll be trying to tie it all together and suggest concrete paths for the digital growth of your company. In our previous conferences, the emphasis has always been in providing live and successful examples of digital strategies and plans implemented or being implemented by companies, preferably in the Asia-Pacific region. We have also planned some time for questions after each presentation, so please feel free to ask the questions and please do not be shy about it. This year, Alora has created our first conference mobile app, and I hope that most of you have already downloaded it. No excuses at all. It's iOS and Android. We're actually quite happy with the job that Alora's did. Well done, boys. Actually, if you already use the app, you'll be able to see that apart from the agenda and some of the general information about the conference, you can also schedule some appointments. So please feel free to use it and let us know later if you have any issue with it. Lynn is here also to help, and also Vlad and Richard will be here. Since we really have a very tight agenda, we have to make a strong effort to keep our schedule. So you're going to see a clock down there in the back, and all of us will be looking at that clock, the ones that are here, and making sure that we keep our presentations within the time allocated. As always, every conference is only possible due to the effort and commitment of several individuals and companies. First, I would like to thank Charles Laughlin, our conference organizer. You'll be seeing a lot of him in the next few days, as well as Neil Polacek, Paul Plant, and Peter Buxton. Our conference committee member, Charlie Lin, who again managed to suggest and to source some very good speakers. And also our co-organizing, Teleinfo Media from Thailand. And of course, our sponsors, Topanli Fund, who will be sponsoring tonight's dinner, and You Were All, who will be sponsoring tomorrow's dinner. Got You will be presenting this afternoon and sponsored today's lunch. Timify and Camilio, who are sponsoring the breaks, and Haystack. I'd also like to thank our speakers and delegates, especially the ones that have come from as far as Europe, the Americas and Africa, and also the delegates that are attending their first ALSMA conference, and I hope this is the first of many to come. I would also like to thank Bong Bautista and Bingo Diago and Michael Tantoko for the support they have been giving us and the association in Manila. And last but not least, Lynn, Super Lynn, as we normally call it. She's the one that puts it all together and ties it all up, so thank you very much, Lynn. Well, done, and I managed to be within my 5 minutes. So please, Charlie.
All right, thank you, Oscar. Welcome, everyone, and just want to add my condolences to the people of Thailand over the loss of the king. It's made for a challenge, but I think we were working through it very nicely, and it's turning out to be a very great experience so far. And we're looking forward to a great couple of days with you. So I am going to begin with a very brief, pretty high-level overview of what I consider 5 trends that are shaping local search. I use the term local search somewhat advisedly. I think there's a better term out there, but for lack of a better one. And these 5 trends, I think, will map very nicely with a lot of the themes that are going to be addressed in the conference. And I'm going to make note of sort of, as I discuss a theme, I'm going to make note of where in the program there'll be a relevant conversation. So it all will tie together. So let's just begin. Number 1, And again, these are 5 trends that I think are having a profound impact on this audience for the most part, the publishers around the APAC region, certainly the companies developing solutions for those publishers, and their competitive field as well. So the first trend that I'm sort of observing being pretty universal is the conversation around the shift in emphasis from sales to service. In other words, the historical constituencies of this association have largely deployed sales forces. It's all, the cost is mostly in sales, the headcount is mostly in sales. Service is relatively secondary component of the operation. As the shift to digital is fully underway, and in some cases businesses are fully digital, they don't even do print anymore, the emphasis, the need for service versus sales personnel is much more profound. So what does that mean? So just to illustrate this, I used to be an analyst at BIA Kelsey. Our last event in May in the U.S., we had John Allen, who's the CEO of Census, speak, and he went through an entire talk about how his business is completely transforming its sales organization, taking out layers, reducing headcount, moving much more of its emphasis on to sales. And the underlying premise of this is that cost of sales over time will be a drag on companies in this industry, because the old sales model is built around the print model. The new organization has to be leaner, has to be much more about fulfillment, service, making sure customers are happy, making sure campaigns are running effectively, and so on. And he recognized this, and he's moving his organization in this direction. And I think other organizations, I was at Peter's over there, Peter Buxton, I was at his show in Amsterdam earlier this year. Most of the conversation among the publishers there was how they're shifting their emphasis from sales to service as a function of reducing churn, increasing customer satisfaction, getting more yield out of accounts, and so on. And again, the main driver is cost of sales. Over time, that's going to be an increasing drag on this industry. And the changing product mix makes sales people not less important, but service personnel is gaining importance relatively. And service is increasingly a revenue driver in many organizations. I think, again, I was at, not to reference all these events I go to, but I was at the Cinda event, and Thabo Siopa, who's the head of Trudon in South Africa, his comment was it's no longer a sales organization. Pretty much the entire organization is involved in sales. So that means there's salespeople, and then there's service people who are also in the process of identifying opportunities for upsell and so on. As the business is no longer annually driven; it's campaign driven. It's not necessarily functioning around a 12-month cycle anymore. So service people are important in that sort of environment. And the next point, I think there's cost in service as much as there's cost in sales, and I think we're going to see a lot of work around offshoring, of course, but also automation, and we're going to hear more about that later from Roger and from others tomorrow about this increasing use of messaging, chatbots, tools like that in order to sort of be a force multiplier for a service organization so that you can get more round-the-clock touches with customers using automated tools. That's not necessarily fully deployed now, but I think that's something we're going to see in the future. And again, greater commitment to service is a big factor in churn reduction. We're going to have a little more conversation on what drives churn, account loss, what can mitigate it, and an increased emphasis on service, quality service is a big factor there. So that's a big trend that I'm seeing, and I think it's becoming more and more universal among the major sort of global players. So we're going to have several sessions relevant to what I've just talked about. I'm not going to list them all, but you can sort of map your, you can look in your agenda and you can see that, we have 4 sessions and probably more that will touch on this topic. So next, the verticalization of everything. Well, maybe not everything, but sort of related to this previous point, we're seeing more of the organizations that are succeeding in this industry are increasingly verticalized, either on the product side, verticalizing of their audience, vertical content to drive audience, and also verticalization of the sales force. And there's a few insights here. that are driving this. You can say, well, verticals are more costly because you have to invest in each one, but horizontal products increasingly on the digital side are not really always well suited. One size fits all doesn't work for a dentist versus a plumber versus a lawyer. They have different business rules, they have different needs, and so there has to be a certain level of customization in order for that to really be effective for each of those customers. And when you have sort of one size fits all, you tend to have sort of a lack of performance potentially, and a lack of satisfaction, and there's often a vertical solution out there that performs better, that is an alternative for that customer. So we're seeing, again, much more product verticalization. If you look at companies like So Local in France, their website solutions, for example, each are vertically oriented. So websites for service providers will emphasize scheduling, for example, and websites for retail will emphasize e-commerce, just as a way to illustrate that. And again, building audience is often a vertically driven enterprise. Again, So Local and also YP Canada are both leading companies that have demonstrated that. And again, many of the companies that we sort of point to as examples of companies that are innovative tend to be verticalized. And I list them here to varying degrees. So Local, I've mentioned. YP Canada, Zap is an Israeli company, fully verticalized business, very successful print-to-digital transformation. And Census, again, in the process of verticalizing its product and its sales organization. And again, when you look at execution at a vertical level is also a potential barrier against churn. Evolution of search. Okay, we're going to talk about this in a few different ways today, tomorrow, and throughout the rest. Again, this is all about search, desktop search. Has already been overtaken by mobile search. Certainly, in this region, mobile is a much bigger driver of consumer behavior. We're seeing, device proliferation changing how consumers are accessing information and so on. So having a product mix built around desktop search doesn't make much sense going forward. So I think this is going to be an increasingly important trend to understand if you're in this industry. And again, we're going to have some interesting conversation this afternoon. We have Roger is going to talk about the whole trend of messaging apps and chatbots, and how that's driving a lot more commerce and customer support and other things. The idea, Internet of Things, AR, VR, we're going to talk about that this afternoon. These are all transforming over time the way people access information, and products have to adapt to this. And again, note several sessions where we'll be touching on this. So, number 4, I'm big on visual puns, I apologize. Shift from media to platforms. It's not really the platform we're talking about, but that is a platform. Okay, so what does this mean? Again, if you look at the financials of the major global companies, if you look at their digital growth rates, typically the growth rate for media-oriented products and services are low single digits, flat, not robust in most cases. There are exceptions to that. Where we see the growth is in non-advertising products and services. And each publisher may define this a bit differently. Some include things like search engine marketing in that bucket. Others include purely tools-oriented products and services like websites, Facebook presence, and so on. But essentially, the sort of branded yellow products, IYP, mobile apps, and so on, that are sort of media-oriented are not growing nearly as fast as the sort of CRM, presence management, other things like that that are more establishing presence, establishing a platform for your customers to increase engagement with their customers. That is the trend where we're seeing much more growth, and I think that's going to continue going forward to the point where that's the largest component of digital revenue for most publishers. So we're going to talk about that in probably more sessions than these two, but these are a couple of sessions that I think will touch on this conversation, which is a very important one, and it's ongoing today. And finally, the notion of driving sales efficiency with data. So what does this mean? Basically, back to point number 1, which was the idea of sales being once considered the greatest asset for publishers. It's still an asset, but the cost of sales has to be brought into line with the new order, financial order of the business. So greater sales efficiency and effectiveness are critical, getting more out of fewer people, more efficient selling out of a much smaller sales force. Data is going to be critical to this effort. You can't do this without really good data. So the idea of selling the right product to the right customer at the right time, which is sort of a definition of a much more efficient sales process, is driven by data. Data understanding your customer better, understanding your prospects better. For example, knowing what your share of wallet is, knowing what their digital footprint is, where they're spending their money online, what their online presence looks like. Well, there's a lot of tools and data out there doing that already. I think it'll have to become much more robust in order to fuel this kind of efficiency. But I think that's where it's going. And again, if you're going to have an e-channel going forward to sort of supplement and drive greater sales efficiency because you can't afford to touch those smaller customers with live salespeople anymore, having excellent data is going to make e-channels effective, whereas they're not particularly today. And again, we're going to touch on this with several sessions. We got one specifically on data-driven selling. We're going to have a panel where we're talking about some of the challenges going on in digital sales, and we're going to talk about measurement, ROI, attribution. So we're going to have a lot of data conversation here as well. And of course, our next speaker is all about data, and we'll get to that in a minute. And so that's it on the 5 trends. I wanted to get through that really quickly. And then I just want to make a few notes, sort of adding to what Oscar said. We're going to be mindful of the schedule, and I am actually right on time now. We got a clock up there. Speakers, be aware of it. When it goes to 0, you're done. When you got a couple minutes left, try to wrap up. We want you to all interact with one another and with the speakers, so please ask questions, raise your hand, blurt things out. We want your questions. We want interaction. We want you to build your knowledge base while you're here. Interact with one another, learn, engage. Try to find out what's new. Try to leave knowing something you didn't know before you arrived. Build your network. That's really why we're here, right? Everyone wants to build their network for themselves personally, for their business. And also have fun. We're in Phuket. It's raining, I get it, but it's still a fun place, and we're lucky to be here. So let's move on. So we're going to move on to our keynote speaker, Dr. Jana Moser. Come on up.